What regional political economy organization will emerge in East Asia? How do the leaders in China think about future regional cooperation? APEC has lost its momentum and relevance to the ongoing regionalism in the Asia-Pacific region. East Asia is undergoing fundamental changes in its regional governance and economic cooperation. Rise of Chinese economic power has become a leading force to reshape regional governance. The regional organization has been unsuccessful in attaining some of its ambitious goals. It's now facing a challenge of how to remain relevant in the future Asia-Pacific regional architecture. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation (APEC) is the most economically dynamic area in the world. APEC membership has grown from original 12 in 1989 to 21 member economies at the present time. Non-discriminatory rules for international trade and investment are essential for their economic success. APEC is an innovative and flexible form of regional cooperation designed to accommodate the diversity of the regional economies. It serves the regional prosperity with state sanction, more rules-based interstate cooperation. APEC provides a good platform for confidence-building measures (CBM) in the Asia-Pacific. APEC has promoted regional building in the Asia-Pacific based on the idea of open regionalism. APEC's members should continue to work for global liberalization under GATT, WTO through non-mutually exclusive elements in regional liberalization program. He's right. APEC could help to force a strong East Asia-US linkage and keep Washington engaged in the region. APEC members have little in common, but in their shared interests and vision that bring them together. The United States has a strong interest in getting involved in the community building process.
Next, APEC also addresses with its problem and limitation. This is because as a consultative forum, APEC does not engage in WTO type of negotiation in reducing and eliminating barriers to trade and investment. APEC program for liberalization are voluntary and decisions are non-binding. Unlike the EU model of full sovereignty, APEC members still have strong political will to retain their economic sovereignty and are not ready to participate in a regional process that gradually transfer sovereignty to any supranational body for regulating trade and economic relations. Second, APEC geography drift is complemented by more wide-ranging and diffuse topics. The growing tension between the interests of Western and Eastern members and the Asean financial crisis eventually derailed the process of the yearly voluntary sector liberalization in 1998. Since then, APEC has been characterized by the strange combination of a loss of direction and mission creep. APEC also suffer from soft institutionalism and an inadequate institutional foundation. The core idea of APEC soft institutionalism is that member action of all statements are to be strictly voluntary and self-imposed without any central enforcement mechanism. In the early years, this might have worked when the WTO multilateral negotiation ran into trouble, and APEC could serve as a regional engine for trade liberalization. But it failed the effectiveness test when regional crises like the AFC and the 9/11 attack occurred. APEC was formed with the idea of serving as the Pacific OECD, but it does not have an OECD type of independent research and evaluation ability, not to mention policy formulation and recommendation function. This weakening of APEC should be a measure of concern to all its member economies. Third, we will see more about APEC and East Asia community building. In recent years, there has been an increasing number of initiative, arrangement and projects on regional community and institutional building in East Asia. These regional measures include bilateral and sub-regional trade agreement, regional security dialogue such as the ASEAN Regional Forum and six-party talks, regional economic and business fora such as the BAU Forum and the ASEAN Cooperation Dialogue, and regional meeting of East ASEAN leaders, for example, ASEAN Plus 3 and the East ASEAN Summit. This steady movement of APEC East ASEAN members toward establishing their own region-wide free trade arrangement or even the creation of an East Asia Committee could generate major new discrimination within the broader Asia-Pacific setting.
Emerging regional architecture towards hybrid regionalism. The emerging regional architecture in the ASEAN Pacific is going to be multi-layered and multi-texture structure. If regional integration process like ASEAN and ASEAN Plus 3 can be regarded as regionalization, in the APEC subregional to notion of the institutional architecture incorporating APEC and ASEM can support the idea of building a more open and inclusive regional architecture in the Asia-Pacific region. The kind of regional architecture would include the possibility for linking two or more regions and bring greater balance to the world of the future regional architecture. Finding an institutional equilibrium in the Asia-Pacific. Entry the 21st century, finding an institutional equilibrium in the construction of regional architecture is a big challenge for APEC and other regional institutional building projects. Under the ASEAN Plus 3 framework, regional states have a large array of diplomatic initiative and functional cooperation project on trade, finance, energy, public health, human resource, tourism, and train border crime to advance regional community building. More powerful players always seek to promote a world populated by a large number of overlapping and sometimes competitive international institutions, a system of what Francis Fukuyama called multilateralism. In his reasoning, international action today can be legitimate of effective but rarely both. Allied regional community building in Europe, these multiple arrangements who not have the right configurations on player and mandates causing more problem for regional architecture and leading major power to practice forum shopping. APEC, the future regional architecture. Forging a common vision for the ASEAN Pacific regional architecture is a major challenge for APEC and other regional institutional building projects. At the heart for the problems are the different view on the constitution, the basic for regional cooperation and integration. They have different view on whether it's ASEAN should build an ASEAN only grouping based on the ASEAN Plus 3 process, or it should focus on the Pan-ASEAN community embedded in the EAS design, or it should pursue a Pan-ASEAN Pacific community erected in the APEC framework. APEC will be only one of several Asia-Pacific regional fora. The latest regional architecture proposal came from Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, was established in 1967 by the non-communist and market-oriented economies of Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore and Thailand. So it was also the world's most economically dynamic region during the past decade. In fact, ASEAN has often been criticized as lacking meaningful economic integration. However, to judge ASEAN as a regional grouping only by the criterion of economic integration is to misunderstand the role of ASEAN as envisaged by its founding fathers. So rapidly changing external and domestic environment, however, have led ASEAN to accelerate the process of economic integration since 1992 through the ASEAN Free Trade Area and ASEAN Growth Triangles.
In terms of the Asian economics, the first point is regional diversities. Considerable diversities had been shown in 6 things, which is historical experience, socio-cultural background, size, level of economic development, industrial structure, and trade orientation. Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and Philippines were colonized exclude Thailand. Post-colonial efforts is to strengthen regional trading ties, which are blocked by similarities in resources endowment and level of industrial competence with limited linking infrastructure. Indonesia is one of the countries which have largest member of Asian in geographical area, population and GNP. The differences Asian in per capita income are larger than found in other developing country groupings. In Asian, the largest country was the least developed, so the differences in economic size are not so clear and the impact of this Asian reach harmony. The Asian economies are rich in natural resources and resource base was largely developed until 1970s, except Singapore. The situation that showed the collapse oil and commodity prices in the early 1980s led to a stronger export orientation. The rapid growth of manufacturer exports have been facilitated by massive inflows of foreign direct investment. Manufacture increased rapidly for Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand. Brunei remains an oil-dependent economy and Singapore with strategic location and free trade policy. It is the manufacturing base of multinational corporation MNCs and a regional commercial, transportation and financial hub. The second point is intra-extra-regional trade and investment linkage. The Asian 6 countries have highly open economies and the extent of foreign investment penetration. Extra-regional trade and investment linkage are quantitatively more important than intra-regional linkage. The main trading partners of the Asian 6 are the OECD countries, import sourcing and export markets. The Asian 6 is heavily dependent on Japan. Intra-Asian trade has neither become more important nor grown faster than extra-Asian trade. Besides, the bulk of intra-Asian trade is accounted for by bilateral trade between Singapore and Malaysia. The Asian region has strong locational advantages and is a major recipient of FDI. Intra-Asian investment remains small relative to inflows from outside the group. The low level of intra-regional industrial investment reflects that the Asian economies depends on extra-regional source of capital and technology. The strong Singapore-Malaysia trade and investment linkage reflect common historical ties under British colonial rule, close geographical proximity, and strong economic complementarity.
Next, we will going to talk about economic cooperation rationale and modalities. When we talk about rationale and modalities, we need to know about Asian cooperation as what we call as rationale for cooperation. Asia in generally perceived to have been successful in achieving its political security goals. Asian sustainability as a regional economic grouping lay in rejecting the easy economic integration model. The Concord provided interrail for economic cooperation in trade and industrial development, banking, finance, food and energy, tourism and transport. Asian 6 reached a milestone agreement to form a free trade area in 1992 and push for further sub-regional economic integration via formation of growth triangles. The end of the Cold War and the Indo-China conflict have weakened Asia's political and strategic underpinnings. Asian 6 faces growing competition from the traditional economies of Eastern Europe, China, and Indochina, as well as the form of liberalizing economies in Latin America and South Asia. Trade liberalization removed price distortions and integrated regional market will enable Asian industries to benefit from internal competition. Next, we will talk about trade and industrial cooperating during 1976 and 1992. First, we need to understand that the Asian's most important programs are aimed to intra-regional and trade liberalization and industrial cooperation. Perceptions of zero-sum competition and politically unacceptable distribution of benefits and costs have resulted in slow progress. The PTA scheme had only a marginal impact on intra-Asian trade, as reflected in the low PTA utilization rate. Asian 4 economies were more competitive than complementary. Each Asian country wanted to protect its industries from foreign competitions. There was fear of unacceptable regional divisions of labor and distributions of benefits and costs if investment decisions were left to market forces.
ASEAN Free Trade AFTA. The fourth ASEAN Summit of January 1992 agreed to the establishment of a free trade area, AFTA. AFTA is intended to help ASEAN economies achieve greater trade and investment competitiveness in the global economy. AFTA, including Vietnam, will have an integrated regional market of over 400 million people with a combined purchasing power of over USD 400 billion, growing at 6 to 8% a year and embracing countries with a wide range of resource endowment and skills. Pooling the resources and market would increase the attraction of ASEAN regions to regional and foreign investor. AFTA focuses on the liberalization of trade in goods within the ASEAN regions through implementation of Common Effective Privital Tariff (CEPT). However, the CEPT scheme as first agreed upon in January 1992 had several limitations. Extending beyond the CEPT, the 1992 AFTA agreement has the CEPT as its cornerstone. With general provision, ASEAN has not only accelerated its tariff reduction but also progressively extended its liberalization and cooperation scheme to include those areas. The CEPT focuses on tariff reduction and intra-ASEAN trade liberalization in goods. Yet tariff may not represent the most serious obstacle to the intra-ASEAN trade, and tariff reduction may not have substantive impact on the trade growth. In December 1995, the ASEAN Summit adopted the ASEAN Industrial Cooperation (ICO) scheme to replace the BBC and AIJV scheme. The approval process is simpler and speedier, with application process within 2 months. ICO products will enjoy immediately free market access rather than the scheduled tariff reduction under AFTA. ASEAN Growth Triangle sub-regionalism is a growing phenomenon in East Asia, as manifested in the rapid emergence of sub-regional economic zones SREZ, various called Growth Triangle, transnational economic zones, and natural economic territories. Those area transnational investment zones that encompass geographically contiguous countries and subnational area. The integration process had cut across not only political barrier but also political and economic system. The driving force is the private sector. Government create facilities, removing the political and policy barrier to the economic actions, and providing and promoting the development to the physical infrastructure and offering investment initiative to the private sector. In Asia regions, three growth triangle among member states had emerged, and national and subnational government create major facilities such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore Growth Triangle IMSGT, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand Growth Triangle IMTGT, and Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines ASEAN Growth Area BIMP EAGA.
Next is Growth Triangle versus Free Trade Area. The Growth Triangle has several advantages over the Free Trade Area (FTA) as a modality of ASEAN economic cooperation. First, the Growth Triangle avoids some of the problems in regional economic integration faced by countries at different stages of economic development and even different economic and political system, as demonstrated by the Greater South China Economic Zone. The FTA is a formal institutionalized regional arrangement. Second, a Growth Triangle is more limited in geographical scope and thus politically more manageable and functionally more flexible. It need not include or end with interest liberalization. So third, for larger and geographically dispersed countries, a Growth Triangle helps promote balanced regional development, as peripheral areas of a country can be drawn into the mainstreams of development by linking with a more developed area across the border. Fourth, a Growth Triangle focuses on economic complementarity to attract investment to produce for the sub-regional and international markets, rather than on enlarging the regional market and protecting it against external competition. A Growth Triangle is less likely to be perceived as a zero-sum game, and since a Growth Triangle is obviously not a discriminatory trading bloc, it is also more acceptable to. So, in conclusion, politically, ASEAN has succeeded in establishing regional stability by helping to overcome traditional sensitivities arising from difference in historical, ethnic, linguistic and religious background, diffusing border dispute, allaying the fears of smaller nations regarding their larger neighbours, territorial ambitions, and providing the stable underpinnings for each member's country to pursue economic development with minimal distraction. So there is an emerging sense of an ASEAN community, whether intra-ASEAN trade liberalization and industrial cooperation have been directly welfare enhancing in is debatable. The ASEAN region was the world most dynamic over the past decade. the economies are expected to remain beyond over the next decade. So ASEAN Economic Cooperation can move beyond AFTA and take advantage of the de facto economic integration process in the Asia Pacific that has resulted from growing trade and investment linkage forged by the private sector.